had this controversy in the gaming world recently, and I think IGN pushed it, and they're acting like it's a massive thing when it comes to gamers. But from what I noticed, the games they're complaining about having it are games like Resident Evil, which were colossal successes. And so I wouldn't say this is a problem. It's like a minor annoyance, sure, which can easily be fixed with mods. Like, I actually seen mods removing the yellow paint. And the idea is that you have these things that are like super obvious, right? Like, you gotta go up the ladder. But the developers, they go out of their way in order to add all of these extra UI features, to put yellow paint on the ladder, to make it absolutely sure that players know what they gotta do. And so players feel infantilized, that they feel as if they're treated like morons, and they're very upset. Now, I understand where the players are coming from, but let me show you where I'm coming from. The plight of a game developer. Because you guys are the gamers, and you know the plight that gamers have, which is fine. And I share that plight, because when I was a gamer myself, I was with you. But like now, being on the other side of the fence, I also understand where game developers are coming from. So like, in this particular scene, what you gotta do is you gotta go to the computer. And then, you gotta click this button in order to turn on the computer. When beta testing the game, 7 out of 10 people did not know to click the button and got stuck. So I decided to make the button flash a little. Still not enough. They can't do this. They just can't. And you know what happens when they can't? They refund the game. Because back in the old day, if they wouldn't know how to press this, they would just go online, they would go through walkthroughs, they would go and talk with their friends on various forums like, hey, how did you manage to get past the computer? And they would be told. Like, yeah, you go and you just click the button and that's how it was. Oh, okay. Or other people would struggle, other people would get stuck. And they would play the game for 1-2 hours. They would be very frustrated. They would go out of their way not to look at the walkthrough, not to see what the solution is. And eventually, when they figured it out, they felt like defeating a Dark Souls boss. And there were many games like this, like Monkey Island, like Broken Sword, you know, games that also inspired me to make my own. But the idea was that you had to actually discover, you had to actually go and try to figure stuff out. And so, now, it's not like that. Now, it's more like, oh, I don't know how to pass this, I'll refund the game. And developers are aware of this. So, obviously, the easiest solution is to just put an arrow here, like a big, massive arrow, like click here. And then people know, because that's what the expectation of the market is, right? Like, I'm not getting paid ESG in order to try to instill behaviors in the market. Like, I know what the reality is. I did the beta testing, I got the response back, and it seems that overwhelmingly people don't know how to pass this. It's too fucking difficult. I don't know why, but it is what it is. And so, now you got two choices. Now you got the choice to just tap a yellow arrow that points towards the button and problem fix, right? Like, easy fix, takes you 2 minutes tops in order to pull it off. Or maybe you can just bypass the puzzle altogether. At the moment that they interact with the computer, it just turns on by itself. Which is probably what I'm going to go with. The other way is to try to be more innovative. It's to try and figure out a way that you incorporate it into the gaming world somehow and hope that the player knows. So like in this situation, you know, the clicking button is something that I thought about. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be enough to drag the player's attention. Like maybe the computer is on standby and they see the button, so they click it. But then you do the other test again and you notice, well, actually it didn't work. So now you're back to the drawing board and you have to do something else and then test it again. And so while this is the superior way of doing it, and I do understand that this is the way game design should actually be done, is not just incredibly costly and time intensive, but it's also very fucking frustrating, right? Like, you gotta, instead of like thinking about other things that need to be done, you're laser focused on this shit, and then you realize that, all right, well, my intentions seem to have made sense, right? Like, you make it flash a little bit, and then people will click it, but then you realize that, no, people still don't click it. And then you're like, okay, what if I have like a power button here, and I make the button larger? And then you try that, and you test it, and it still doesn't work. And so it's very frustrating, right? And it's also frustrating because you're trying to think that players aren't this lazy and stupid, but statistically speaking, they are. Like statistically speaking, some of them aren't. They actually manage to pass it. Others are. And you also have to come to grips with the reality that if people get bored, they refund the game. There's no more conversation. There's no discussions. They just refund the game. And so you're financially incentivized to put that yellow paint there. It's just not worth it. Like, there's people who would like the game. They would like the rest of the game. But if they get stuck in the beginning, well... And I think, like, this is the actual controversy. And the reason that developers are being condescending and infantilizing gamers is because, statistically speaking, that's what the results are. Like, it doesn't make me happy knowing that there are some gamers out there that don't need this. What I do know as a developer is that there are a lot of gamers out there that will refund the game if I don't put this in. And then there's a percentage of gamers that don't care about it either way. And finally, there are other gamers which, surprisingly enough, may even overlap with the first group. Like there may be gamers that wouldn't know to go up this ladder if it wasn't for the yellow paint, but they bitch about it anyway. I guarantee to you there is some significant overlap over there. But they are getting annoyed by it. However, it doesn't really ruin the overwhelming enjoyment of the game. So they're getting, they see the yellow paint, they go, and then they play the game anyway. And then they still say, oh yeah, Resident Evil 2 is a great game. Right? So, like, when you're looking at it from a marketing decision, and you have, like, a group of people that simply will not put up with it, unless there is yellow paint, and the other group of people, not only do they put up a bit, but they're a little bit grumpy, however, they will still play the game, then you get, right? And the thing is, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, but, like, it's bad game design, like, you can make it better, you can incorporate it in such a way that, like Portal 2. Portal 2 used to do this, and they give example of other games that make it so you don't have to use the yellow paint. And that is true. But the problem is, like, when you actually do that, and you pull it off, no one gives you credit for it. Like, people forget the ladder is just one thing, but there's probably, like, thousands of stuff that the players are struggling with. And sometimes the developer actually does incorporate it into the game, but, like, no one knows that they did it. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say the player is walking on a bridge, and there's a castle that explodes on the right. And you want the players to see the entire explosion. You want the players to see it from the beginning to the end. How do you do that without forcing a cinematic cutscene, without forcing the players to look to the right? Well, the best way to do it is to put an enemy there that opens fire on the player. And when that happens, the player instinctively looks to the right. And as they do so, they see the castle exploding. Right? There's no yellow paint. There's no arrow look here. There's nothing like that. It's just like seamlessly incorporated in the world. How many people do you think will know what you just did? Like, how many gamers are actually going to be aware that the enemy was there just to make them look to the right? The answer is none, right? So they will see the yellow paint in the beginning. They will think it's bad game design. Then they will go to another event where the developer actually put time and effort to think about how to manipulate the player in such a way so that they see the cutscene. And no one will care, right? Like, the game will still have the taint of the yellow paint. It will be like, oh yeah, well, this is bad game design. In other words, when you're developing a game, what you notice is that the things that actually are good and you put a lot of effort into it, very few people would admire or appreciate them. Meanwhile, the things that stand out are all the bad things. And so you just have a scale that only tips one way. And it's very difficult to please the player. Obviously, the best thing to do is to not use yellow paint at all. But again, I don't think that this is something that developers can fix. If gamers themselves were to go back to the old mentality where, you know, you keep on playing a game and you're trying to figure out for yourself and you have more patience, you don't Alt F4, maybe you'll go online and you look for some guides, then you'll see the yellow paint disappear. Until then, the yellow paint stays. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. Take care.